Here's one that's always near and dear to my heart that our company, we like working with you guys because you guys do all the things we don't want to do. We have no desire. We want to be there our goal is to be that 99% of the time we don't have an active incident, helping you get better with pen testing and all these other things and adversary simulations and all that. So you are ready to go. We don't want to have anything to do with the response. You work really, really well with us. But one that always gets to me is a lot of people, what do people do with custom web apps? How do you secure those? Because that's a huge thing. They're all over the place and everybody seems to kind of ignore those. You know what I'm saying? As far as
absolutely, yeah. 100%.
like,
so there's a couple things. One of the things that our engine allows us to do, and depending on how you have your app instrumented, is we can actually end up raising alerts and like running through our engine to sort of normalize them and be able to respond to them. The key thing that usually requires though is being able to sit down with whoever built the app. And this is the part of the problem is like a lot of times you'll come in and like, who built it? Somebody who left 5 years ago, something like that. And that becomes a little bit more challenging. But if you're talking about a custom app, we tend to look at things and say, okay, well, there are a few classes of attack that this thing's going to suffer from. What would happen if X, Y, and Z? Where are your big security pinch points? We can do a little bit of risk analysis and you can say, okay, well, we have detections around this and this and this and this. Those detections will bubble up into, like, say, our SIM, and that's where our ability to integrate into a SIM comes in handy, right? So back to like the top of the hour, when you were asking like, what are the benefits or drawbacks with having an MDR that has coverage versus an MDR that goes deep on a particular tech? Right. An MDR that coverage can lean into, okay, if that custom web app is your crown jewels, let's talk about how we would actually get a signal out of that and then what I would do to investigate, right? Like that's a thing, right? If you're just covering EDR or whatever, going to be a little more challenging. You'll have to instrument the server that it's running on and then hope that that's enough to get there. There's one last thing I would call out, which is this. In the case where you have something that goes bump in the night in the web app, the thing that I've discovered over time is that the harder part is not necessarily the detection, although that can get tricky depending on what you're looking for. But the harder part is the response, because, okay, like how do I investigate this? Like, is that normal? Like, is that supposed to happen? And when you get to the answer of no, who do you call? What does the escalation path look like, and that kind of stuff? And that's where you get into like, hey, has anyone ever run like an incident simulation on this thing? Like one of the things that was kind of interesting, we were working with a customer, this was a number of years ago now, and they had some custom applications, crown jewels, this kind of thing. We ran through sort of like, okay, what would risk look like here? And then we're like, okay, so let's say for the sake of argument that got popped right there, who would we call? And they're like, no, I don't even know. I have no idea. Like, how would you turn it off? Like, that's a thing that you want to have an answer to,
right?
And right quick. So that's a thing, because when we deal with folks who are in the cloud, a lot of times the answer is like, okay, well, we're gonna turn off, we're gonna shut down that VPC, or we're gonna turn off that EC2 instance or something like that. And then the question is, okay, like who has the credentials to do that? Like at 2 a.m. right? Like who do we call? Right, and that gets to be kind of a tough call. So
that's one we'll want to record, I think, because that's some good advice. I think,
okay.
What's an incident look, because that's a big area. A lot of people
seem
to ignore them, and you're right. Who even knows how to get into it? If you did get into it, what would you look for?
It's 100%. And I mean, like, so one of the things that's funny is, and people forget this, because if you haven't worked the class, if you haven't done a 2 a.m. shift where you're trying to get a hold of somebody and you realize their phone is not by their bed, right. It's real ugly, right? So you end up in a situation where you're like, okay, so there's one developer who has the root password for this thing, who can do any of this, and they go on vacation. Okay, well, you have an unacceptable risk situation. I don't care how much we monitor, we're actually not going to be able to respond particularly well, because when we do, Susie is going to be on vacation. That's a problem, right? Yeah.
Right.
So.
Yeah.